Heading into Dynasty's release, I dropped a video calling into question the viability of the then new aim mechanic. And I was right. At the time, the aim mechanic missed the mark. But I also mentioned in that video that we had to consider that those pieces were just the foundation for more to come. And that more has indeed come in Outsiders. So where is the aim mechanic now? Is it viable? I think probably yes. For certain, it's in a much better spot. A huge shout out to our channel members for supporting what we do here. If you want to get involved with the channel and the Dice Commando community, please consider joining as a channel member. Remember, these videos are only possible with your support. You can show that support with a like, a subscribe, and by leaving us a comment and sharing your feedback. Community first, and go Commando. Hey there, Flesh and Blood folks, and welcome back to Go Again, a fabulous cast here on Dice Commando. Thank you so much for checking in today, where I'm revisiting the aim mechanic now that we've seen all the spiffy new toys coming out of Outsiders. As you recall, I was previously not very impressed with the aim mechanic in general. In a video I posted just before Worlds, I argued that the extra steps involved in getting the counter on the arrow was just not really worth the upside. And ultimately, I argued that the mechanic was not mature enough to be truly effective. And now, while sure, some Ranger truthers very strongly disagreed, I think the results have spoken for themselves. Of the very few top 8s for Azalea in ProQuest season, I think there was like 3 or 4, not one of the reported lists was using the Sanskar Greatbow. So as we go through this, let me know in the comments what you think about aim. There's no doubt it got better, but the question is, did it get better enough? Let me know what you think below. Also remember, we're about to go through another set release, which means we're going to need singles like crazy. And if you're looking for singles, please don't go reward the speculators. Go to my boy Travis at Fab Foundry. He's a good person, owns a brick and mortar store. Just go to my boy. Just go check him out and see what he's got to offer. Also, if you do go, please use the link below. I get a little kickback from that, which basically, let's be honest, I just take and then give right back to Travis. So it's the circle that keeps on giving. So thank you for that. All right, now inherently, aim is an add-on mechanic. Now what I mean by that is that it doesn't change the way that an arrow works, but at least in concept, it enhances the way the arrows work. As such, in order for aim to be a successful mechanic, one of two things needs to happen. Either aim needs to be as simple as loading or pumping an arrow, or aim can be more difficult to achieve, but must then have strictly better tools in terms of power level. And inherently, I think this makes sense. It either needs to be no extra work, or have upside for that extra work. So as we go through today's video, we'll be referring back to these options. Now, given that Flesh and Blood is a combo game and that aim is an add-on mechanic, number 2 seems at least conceptually easier to develop. Basically, creep, but as a cost. However, while that higher power level may make it more attractive, it doesn't necessarily make it more functional. And higher power means nothing if it can't be played. And up until now, I believe that was really the challenge that aim has faced. The upside wasn't worth the extra difficulty, and for some arrows, they weren't even really worth the upside at all versus the existing pool. In other words, they were failing both of my success criteria. For example, let's compare Headshot, a classic standard arrow from Arcane Rising, with the newer aim-based Longshot. Now, mathematically, Longshot 0.5 is a better rate than Headshot's 1.6, but from a practical standpoint, Headshot is just easier to shoot. It can be loaded face up with any bow, and in most cases fired off using resources from the same pitch card, and often the one you drew off of Death Dealer. Longshot without an aim counter is just a really bad arrow. Given the cost-benefit comparison, Headshot is almost certainly the better include. And now sure, that's just one case. And no, I'm not ignoring that there are certainly some very high payoffs for aim counters, like Immobilizing Shot and Deadeye with its pump. But by and large, up until now, aim was not worth the extra hoops you'd have to jump through, combined with the fact that many of the arrows were just flat out worthless without an aim counter. And I think the mechanic in general was struggling. That said, Outsiders is here, and aim has gotten easier and much more consistent. We also, at a basic level, are now able to baseline out that the value of an aim counter is roughly one resource, plus perhaps a condition, as demonstrated clearly by Crow's Nest and Barbed Castaway. Crow's Nest is one of the awesome new quiver equipment pieces that go right alongside a bow, and in this case it's an Azalea spec. Whenever an arrow is put face up into your arsenal from your deck, you may pay one resource. If you do, put an aim counter on it. And of course, Barbed Castaway's second ability there, once per turn instant, for one, you may turn up a face down arrow in your arsenal. If you do, put an aim counter on it. Crow's Nest is almost certainly a gift from above for Azalea, and while it only applies generally to arrows loaded with her ability, it's functionally just as simple as loading an arrow. For Riptide in his new bow, it's even easier. By doing what he wants to do anyway, he loads an arrow face down, then use the bow to flip it face up with an aim counter for 1 resource off of, potentially, the same pitch card that we'll use to fire off the arrow. So now with Outsiders, the aim mechanic satisfies my number 1 condition for success. It's essentially as simple as pumping an arrow, and is repeatable and more consistent. Now, I would be remiss here to not point out again the long shot versus headshot case. Given the 1 resource cost that has to go into the aim counter, long shot is still functionally worse than headshot, effectively a 2-5. Outsiders then we added to the quiver, see what I did there, the new Skybound shot. Again, it's a 1-6, assuming it has an aim counter, so after the loading the resource for aim and firing it off, it's a 3-6. Compared again to headshot, which is functionally a 2-6, headshot remains just the better arrow, not necessarily in pure value, but certainly in functionality. So with all that said, we're in this weird spot with aim where now we need to evaluate how good the bonus has to be for my number 2 condition. In the examples we just looked at, it's very clearly not the case. There's zero reason to run aim given what we've looked at. But with the new Ranger tools we got in Outsiders, I do believe there's enough of that upside value to make aim at least worth experimenting with, and I'm going to be trying to take advantage of some of those pretty vicious on-hits, because 1 damage for 1 resource may stink, but a massive on-hit, well, it's a lot harder to value that. And I'm not the only one, by the way, who's coming to this conclusion. Have you seen the price spike on something like a Deadeye? It popped for sure, and it makes sense. Given the increase in playability of the aim mechanic itself, a yellow +3 pump for 1 resource that imparts a killer on-hit seems really strong. Azalea can Death Dealer to load, do her things, Crow's Nest, and play Deadeye. A dominated +3 arrow with a card-stripping on-hit is not too shabby at all. Now Riptide likely has his ugly green eyes set on mostly 0-4 arrows, and yes, it's unclear if he'll always want to be putting resources into his turn. But if he does, there's no shortage of good playline options there either. A mobilizing shot is one with lots of promise, kind of like a neutered Red in the Ledger of sorts. Ultimately, I think the aim mechanic is in a playable spot now with Outsiders. It remains to be seen, of course, how the additional resource demand ends up playing out, and how decks will have to change to accommodate that higher pitch demand. It may not pan out overall, but certainly we're in a place where including aim-based arrows is at least much more manageable. Azalea always likes her on-hits, and combined with Crow's Nest, things are looking really good for her. Riptide shouldn't struggle at all to get them regardless of what type of build he focuses on. Lexi sure is a different story, but hey, she can load Trace, Fuse, and make Frostbite, so I think she's just fine. Anyway, folks, that is it for today. If you made it this far, give me at least a double D for Death Dealer in the comments. Thanks for joining. Let me know what you're thinking about aim, and go Commando.